Is Texas finally ready to secede? The Texas GOP officially calls for a secession referendum for 2023 as the Texit movement heats up. We're going to take a look at the resolution that was just passed by the Texas GOP. We're going to see how momentum has indeed been growing for Texas to form its own independent nation. And make sure to stick with me to the very end of this video when I'll reveal how what's happening in Texas is actually happening all over the world. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, patriots all across the globe. Dr. Steve here with you, your patriot professor, helping you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. And for all of you gold and silver patriots out there, you know who you are. You love the timeless value of silver and gold, particularly in this insane economy. Well, a huge shout out from our good friends over at Goldco to all of you. You've apparently been ringing their phones off the hook, and they couldn't be more excited to serve their fellow patriots. If you don't know them, gang, make sure to click on that link below and give them a visit. Goldco is a Patriot Gold company that specializes in helping you find out how you could protect your retirement with the timeless trustworthiness of gold and silver. And they're so awesome. They want you to succeed so much that they're going to give you up to $10,000 in free silver when you open an account with them. They're that kind of patriot. They're one of us, gang. But this is a limited time offer, so do not wait. Click on that link below or go to turleytalkslikesgold.com and let's keep those phones ringing off the hook for them. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. We've got some breaking news on the secessionist front. The Republican Party of Texas just passed a resolution in their party platform that calls for a referendum vote on whether to secede from the United States. The Texas Republican Convention recently met in Houston, and it frankly was one of the most bold political meetings imaginable. Not only did the Republican Party of Texas expressly and formally reject the results of the 2020 election, coming out and overtly refusing to even acknowledge bike riding Biden as the legitimate president, but party delegates declared that the U.S. government has indeed infringed on Texas' right to self-government and that the citizens of Texas should put to a vote whether they want to remain under the shackles of D.C. Under a section titled State Sovereignty, the platform states, quote, pursuant to Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution, the federal government has impaired our right of local self-government. Therefore, federally mandated legislation that infringes upon the 10th Amendment rights of Texas should be ignored, opposed, refused, and nullified. Texas retains the right to secede from the United States, and the Texas legislature should be called upon to pass a referendum consistent thereto. And so the platform goes on to state that Texas Republicans want the state legislature to pass a bill in its next session, quote, requiring a referendum in the 2023 general election for the people of Texas to determine whether or not the state of Texas should reassert its status as an independent nation. Now, I know many of you are familiar with this movement known as Texit, which is the Texas version of Brexit, right? Which, of course, was the referendum that successfully emancipated the United Kingdom from the European Union. Momentum for Texit has been slowly but steadily building for quite some time, particularly with the growing frustration over the total inability for Washington, D.C. to reform itself. Last year, Texas Republican Representative Kyle Biederman actually introduced a bill on the Texas House floor that would have allowed Texans to vote on whether to secede from the United States. Allen West, the chairman of the Texas GOP, he turned some heads when he suggested secession after the Supreme Court dismissed the Texas lawsuit challenging the 2020 election results and procedures. He left no doubt that he unreservedly supports Texans voting on whether to stay in the union or form their own nation. And we've actually had Daniel Miller, the president of the Texas Nationalist Movement. He's been one of our guests for our Insiders Club. Our Insiders members got to talk to him live and ask him their questions. You can join our Insiders Club just by clicking on the link below. You're going to absolutely love it. We talk live together each week. You're going to love the fellowship and the community there. But in that conversation with Daniel, he made it absolutely clear that as far as he was concerned, Texas seceding from the Union was not a matter of if, it was only a matter of when. Now, of course, Daniel's operating with the assumption that Washington, D.C. is unreformable. It's beyond fixing. And he may be right. He may be right. But it's pretty clear that support for secession has been growing rather than shrinking. Back in 2009, when asked, do you think Texas should be better off as an independent nation or as part of the United States of America, 48% of Republicans, 40% of independents, and even 15% of Democrats believe that Texans would benefit from independence. A few years later, in 2014, a Reuters Ipsos poll asked Texans if they thought they should leave the Union. An astonishing 54% of Republicans, 49% of independent voters, and 35% of Democrats favored an independent Texas. It's absolutely astonishing find. And Texans, they're not alone. A new poll found that half of all Republicans in the South support secession. In fact, it goes further. USA Today fairly recently noted that the U.S. is experiencing what they called secession fever. And this was primarily manifesting itself in rural areas, right? Many residents in the exurbs, the more rural parts of many states, want to secede from their respective states because those states they're living in are dominated by residents of large metropolitan and urban centers. And so it's becoming more and more popular for Oregonians, for example, to want to join Idaho, and Virginians and Marylanders identifying more with West Virginians. The point here is that rural areas throughout our nation are not standing idly by and allowing their futures to be determined either by Democrat monopolies and cosmopolitan centers or by rhino Republican neocons like John Cornyn and Lindsey Graham, who sell out their voters literally every single time. However, I have to say that I think something much deeper is going on here than just frustration over the dolts in D.C. What's happening in Texas and in Oregon and throughout many of the rural areas across our nation is actually indicative of a much larger trend of secessionist tendencies that have broken out all over the world. But before I forget, you got to get one of these cool shirts. My George Orwell, Did I Call It or What, right? 1984. You are going to love these shirts, and you can get your own. The most common feedback, by the way, that you get is people come up to you and tell you how much they love their shirts. You could get your own simply by clicking on the link below and visiting our merch store. It's a great way to support our channel and spread Patriot hope far and wide. Our designs are punchy and fun, but they're not going to last for long, so make sure to grab one for yourself. Grab one for the Patriot in your life. Click on that link below. Go to store.turleytalks.com. That is store.turleytalks.com. So what's going on here with the secessionist fever, right? Why are we seeing secessionist sentiments break out throughout our nation? Well, the key to understanding what's going on here is to recognize that it is emphatically not just happening here in our nation. Secession is a trend going on all over the globe. The old Cold War dominated world, right? The world dominated by Western globalism on the one hand and Soviet communism on the other, of course, is dead. And as a result, the world is beginning to break up, as it were. More and more populations are indeed beginning to assert their independence, and they're beginning to fracture to form more microstates. In fact, over 35 nations have been added to the world map since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. Russia lost a third of its territory overnight, with dozens of nations seceding. Europe began to add nations to its map with all the former Yugoslavian nations. We look at Slovenia and Croatia and Bosnia and Lithuania. In Africa, you got Rwanda and Burundi and South Sudan. You have major secessionist movements in Scotland and Catalonia and Quebec. I mean, we could go on and on. And what all of this is pointing to is the fact that the modern world, which began in the 18th century Enlightenment and pushed the notion of colonialism and colonization in order to enforce a single one-size-fits-all worldwide political and economic system rooted in scientific rationalism. That world, the modern world, of which liberal globalism is its major spawn, that world is dying. It's collapsing. More and more, the world is becoming what scholars call postmodern. And as such, populations are increasingly rejecting globalism and embracing their own form of tribalism and nationalism. Scholars have long predicted this. I'm thinking particularly of the work of the French sociologist Michel Maffesoli and his conception of neo-tribalism. It's the notion that the world is more and more reorganizing around religious, racial, and in the case of Texas, regional identities. And the basic argument here is that with the death of liberal globalism, which has been collapsing now for at least the last 3 decades, with the inevitable death of liberal globalism, the world is basically fracturing. It's breaking up. And populations are increasingly reorganizing themselves around their own shared identity markers, such as nation, culture, custom, ethnicity, race, religion, region. I would argue this is precisely the tribalizing dynamic that's behind BLM. And it's also the same dynamic that's given us America First and Brexit. These are all anti-globalist movements that are working themselves out in different ways. Some are re-embracing civic nationalism, like we see in Hungary and Poland and MAGA. Some are embracing civilizationalism, like we're seeing currently in Russia and China and India. And some are embracing more micro-nationalisms and tribalisms, like we're seeing in all the secessionist movements around the world, including Texit. So that's what I think is going on here with the Texas Republican Party. I think it goes way beyond simply frustration with the dolts in D.C. That frustration is certainly there and well-deserved, but secessionist sentiments are indeed the new normal. Globalism is out. Tribalism is in. And the world map is changing even as we speak. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video. I just uploaded it on the J6 committee backfiring as voters are turning to Trump in droves. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on that link, and I will see you over there. God bless.